Okay, so I'm quite shocked at how good Tailwind CSS is. Like, I've had a lot of videos about Bootstrap and a lot of videos about just designing and Figma, but I had some comments in the videos where people asked me create a video of Tailwind CSS. Now, I haven't used Tailwind in a while, so I was like, you know what, I'm gonna create a video on Tailwind CSS, and I am completely blown away at how it has progressed and how easy it is to spin up a website from start to finish. So this video is all about, I'm showing you how to properly set up a Tailwind CSS in a Docker container, as well as I'm going to show you a few extra things. Now, I am going to create a light mode and a dark mode, and I'm going to show you how to make a few changes within that so that's super easy to use. So with that all said, make sure to smash that like and subscribe button. I'll truly appreciate that. And then here's a question I have for you. Is Tailwind CSS actually better than Bootstrap? Drop it in the comments below. I would love to know what you guys are thinking about that. And then the other thing is, I personally think that Bootstrap and Tailwind is perfect depending on what type of project you are using. So with that all said, let's jump into it. Let me show you how to do this properly. Okay, so first things first, before we jump into this entire thing, and trust me, you are going to like what I'm showing you, because as I've said in the intro, we are going to put this in a Docker environment, which is going to make it super powerful, which means it's completely separated to your local machine. But I'll kind of show you everything as we kind of go through this. Now, as you can see on the screen, I have Tailwind CSS open. So this is kind of the base where we're going to start everything. Before we start with anything, before I hit this get started thing, let's just quickly chat about what you need to actually be successful in this tutorial or in this video for that matter. So first things first, we want to make sure that we have Visual Studio Code installed. Now, I am going to run this in a Mac environment. You can also run this in a Windows environment. It's pretty straightforward. As I've said in my previous videos, you can also activate WSL, and drop in the comments below if you want me to show you how to actually create a WSL or activate WSL on your Windows machine. So make sure to comment that, and I will definitely look into that. So as we look into this, first off, like I said, you want to make sure you install and download Visual Studio Code. So mine is already installed. The next one you want is also going to save a lot of time, is the Docker Hub. Now, you don't specifically need the Docker Hub. We're not going to use the Docker Hub that much. We're only going to use the Docker Hub for basics, so making sure that everything is running the way it should be. And again, if you have a Mac, you want to install it for the Apple chip, or if you have an older Mac, you want to install it for the Intel. But you're going to notice as you navigate to this page, even if you're on a Windows PC, you are going to notice that it is indeed showing the correct version you need to download. All right, so with that all said, the other thing is Node.js. Now, because we are going to run this in a local Docker environment, you don't technically need Node.js or npm on your local machine. We are going to set it up in the Docker environment, and the whole goal of the Docker environment, once again, is so that we can create a container that's completely isolated. And this is what we're going to do in this video. But again, it's always a good thing to install Node.js if you don't have it. So again, just navigate to or search or Google Node.js, and you will find the download page, which is right here, and you will find the correct installation that you need to install. Okay, so with that all said, we have Node.js, we have Docker, we have Visual Studio. That's all good, and that's all set. All right, so let's navigate to the installation. So there's a couple of things we need to do to actually successfully install Tailwind CSS, and it's pretty straightforward. You're going to see it's pretty straightforward to do all of this. And basically, when you go to the installation, they say, hey, run a couple of commands here and you should be good to go. And that's what we're going to do. So first off, we are going to open up a Visual Studio Code. So I am going to open it up on my end. I'm going to open up a fresh copy here. All right, so with a fresh copy of Visual Studio Code opened up, there's a few plugins that I quickly want to show you. And when I say plugins, I'm also referring to extensions. When you navigate to the extensions part, now I have quite a bunch installed just because I develop a lot of different projects. I develop for a lot of different kind of scenarios. First off, we want to make sure that we install Tailwind's actual CSS plugin. This plugin that they have created is super powerful. So I'm just going to click on it and I'm going to show you. When I click on it, you're going to see that we have Tailwind plugin right here, or extension, or whatever you want to call it, and you can go and install it. So go ahead and do that. First thing is you want to install this because they have IntelliSense, which makes life so much easier to code. So you definitely want to install that. The second one we want to install is Docker. So Docker is another extension that I love, and this is the one I use, is the one from Microsoft. I feel like it's the easiest one for me. And in conjunction with this Docker Explorer and the Docker Hub that we have, which mine is right here, when I click on this, it will open up and we will see that I have a container, I have images, volumes, and all that good stuff. But make sure you have both of them installed and activated before we jump into this. All right, so those are the basics of the plugins. Now there's tons more that you can install, and you might see that I have a few extra ones, and drop in the comments below if you want me to drop in the comments of this video which plugins I love or which extensions I use on a daily basis while I'm coding. All right. With that all said, now we have the base out of the way. We have a brand new Visual Studio Code. There's nothing going on. So first things first, we want to select open folder. Now we are not going to use a Git repository for this specific video. I have different videos. If you look in the description below, and I think I'm going to drop it in the top there as well, if you want to see how to properly set up Git, I have a video where I do it with a company called SiteGround. If you are interested in hosting your websites, they are definitely the go-to hosting provider I would recommend. Anyway, coming back to it, when we go and select folder, now I have a temp folder. Technically, you normally want to put this in a repo folder, but I'm just going to use temp folder, and I'm going to create a new folder, and let's call this Tailwind. I'm just going to call it Tailwind, something basic like that. And we're going to open up the file structure or the folder structure. And the first thing Visual Studio Code is normally going to ask you is, hey, can we trust this? And of course you can. This is your computer. So we're going to hit trust, and we're going to make sure that everything is up and running. Now on the left-hand side, you can see there's absolutely nothing, which is good. This is what we want. So the first thing we want to do is we want to set up our actual Docker environment. And the way to do it is we're going to right click and we're going to say new file. But actually, I'm going to show you something cooler. Now, if you have WSL activated, or if you are running on a Mac, we are going to do this through the terminal. But again, if you are on Windows and you don't have WSL activated, you can do exactly the same as what we're going to do now by just right clicking and creating a file and or a folder. So first thing, we're going to hit terminal and we're going to say new terminal. Then with the terminal, we are going to say touch and we're going to say Dockerfile. When you do that, it's going to create a Dockerfile on the left-hand side. And the next thing I'm going to do is actually create my folder structure. So I'm going to say mkdir and we're going to say src. And when we do that on the left-hand side again, you are going to see that it's creating that src file, which is beautiful. Again, if you're running on Windows, right click, you can just go and create file or folder. This is just an extra step. This is just an extra little feature in the terminal so that you can kind of get used to it. That's why I'm showing it. All right. So with that, we have the src, we have our Dockerfile created. Now that we've done that, we want to go and type in Node and we want to type in V. I just want to make sure that we have Node activated and it's version 20. Everything is looking good. Again, you don't have to do this. You don't have to specifically run npm on your local part. We are going to do that in the Docker as well. But again, this is good practice. This is good practice to kind of follow me with that. And by the way, all these comments that I'm adding or all these comments that I'm typing out, I will be adding it to the description of this video. All right, so with this all done, the next step I want to do is I actually want to go into the src folder and I want to create another folder. So I'm going to go mkdir and we're going to say CSS, and we're going to create a CSS folder. And when we open up the actual src folder on the left-hand side, it's not actually going to open it up or open up everything. It's just going to say src/css, which means that there is a CSS folder within our src. So that's pretty good. That's exactly what we want. All right. So the next step is I want to go one step back. So we're going to go cd and .. and it's going to take us back to the main folder, which is exactly where we want. Now, with that all said, now we're actually going to install Tailwind. So I'm navigating back to the browser, and the first thing I want to do is npm install Tailwind. Now, quick tip. I would recommend that you type this out. I'm going to copy it just because I don't want the video to be like 2 hours long. But one recommendation I can give you as a developer is type out the actual terminal commands, because you can memorize that and it's definitely going to help you. So I am going to highlight this time. Again, I'm recommending that you type it out. We're going to navigate back and I'm going to drop it in there. And basically what we're doing here is we are installing Tailwind directly into our project right here. So what I did there is I did a quick install, and on the left-hand side at the top in the folder structure, we can see we have our node module. So everything looks good. Everything is the way that I want at this point. Now, one thing that I do want to add is that we want to add an actual Tailwind CSS JS config file, or whatever you want to call it. So that's the next command that we are going to copy. Again, type it out. You're going to thank me later if you do that. I'm going to paste it in here, and we are going to create an actual Tailwind config.js file. So on the left-hand side, you'll notice a couple of things. We still have our Dockerfile. We do have our Package.json, which was automatically created when we installed Tailwind. And then we have our Tailwind.config.js file. So good start. We're at a good point right now, which means that the next steps is basically configuring everything. So next up, we are going to configure our Docker file. So we're going to take the Docker file, we're going to open it up, and there's a couple of things that we're going to add in here. So first off, I'm going to say from, I just want to spell it correctly. And by the way, if you hear my keyboard, I have a mechanical keyboard, which sometimes is a little loud, but I really like a mechanical keyboard. Drop in the comments below if you agree with me. Mechanical keyboard is kind of the way to go. Anyway, what I did here is I said from node, and we're basically creating the latest node. And then I am setting the work directory of this Docker container. So I'm going to say work dir. And when you just type in W, it's going to auto-complete everything for you. So that's kind of great, but we got to modify it a little bit. I want to say usr/src/app. Perfect. Next thing I want to do is copy. So there's a couple of things that I'm doing here is, first off, I'm going to copy the package.json file first. And the reason I'm doing that, because you're going to notice that the next line or the next command, we are going to copy everything. But the reason we are copying the package.json file first is because of how the caching layers work in Docker. So copying that first, we are pre-caching it before we actually physically creating the Docker environment. Therefore, it's just faster. You're not going to see a difference when you have a small project. This is much more effective when you have a large project. And it's all about performance. And if you follow me, if you subscribe to my YouTube channel, you would know that everything that I code, it's all about performance, and it's definitely all about security. It's all about doing everything the right way. All right, so with that all said, the copy, first thing we're gonna say is package, and then we're gonna have a little star there, and we're gonna say .json, and we're gonna say // and essentially we are copying the package.json file here on the left-hand side. The next one I wanna do is run npm install. So what we're doing here is we installing the actual Node.js within our isolated Docker container. Super powerful. Make sure you have that. Now, with that all said, the next one is we're going to copy everything. So we're just going to say copy ... So it's literally going to take all of this and it's going to copy it into our Docker environment. But there's one thing that we don't want to copy. So we are going to set up a DockerIgnore here in a little bit, because we want to ignore a couple of files or folders that we don't want in the Docker environment. All right, so with that, one thing I want to do is I want to open up an expose port, because we are going to set up an isolated environment, like I said, but we also going to run this as an actual website in the Docker, and we want it to be exposed so that we can actually see it in our local environment with the PC or the Mac that you're running it with. So next thing I want to do is I want to add CMD, and we are going to add npm. I don't want to do that. I want to do it inside of it. I want to say npm, and we're going to say comma, and we are going to say start. Perfect. So those are the basics of our Docker file right here. And I am going to make it a little simpler because I added a couple of comments in, preparing for this video. And I am going to drop it in here just so that it makes it a little easier when we come back to it. If we need to make any changes, it's going to make it easier to do so. So I'm just going to add these comment lines in here. And you'll notice that, for instance, what we just did here is we copied the package.json and maybe potentially the package lock, or if we're using yarn, in our case, we're not, we are doing it right there. And we are with the next comment installing, and I'm just going to tidy this up a little bit, installing any needed packages. And we are doing a full copy. So I'm going to add that in as well, copying the current directory. And here I'm making port 3000 available. And the last one is run the app in the container when it's launched. All right, so that is it. That is the basic Docker container setup. The next part that I want to do is set up the DockerIgnore. So let's go back to the terminal. Again, if you're on Windows, just right click and say new file. So just going right click, new file. But if you want to be fancy, we're going to say touch and we are going to say DockerIgnore. And we're going to hit enter. Just want to make sure I spelled that correctly. Yeah, that looks pretty good. On the left-hand side, I have the DockerIgnore up and running. So one thing I want to add here is node modules. And I also, we're not using Git in this project, but it's a good thing to add it. Get muscle memory, get used to adding Git. And the other one I want to add is DockerIgnore, not ignore, but DockerIgnore. All right, that's all done. Now I've just hit save. So we have a couple of things going on here. The next step I want to do is I want to configure my actual package.json file. So we have pretty basic setup here right now. And again, I am going to copy and paste just because it makes it a little easier. And again, I'll have everything in the description of this video below. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to get rid of it. And we're going to open up a fresh bunch of curly braces. The first one I want to do is I want to name my project or my project file a specific name. So I'm going to call it just Tailwind CSS setup. You can name it whatever you want. And we are going to say version 1.1.1. And this is kind of where we get into the nitty gritty of development, right? We are working with different types of versions here. Now you can add a description if you want, but again, I don't want this video to be like 2000 hours. So I'm going to leave mine blank. You don't have to add anything in there. It's totally up to you. The next one I want to add is a main. So I want to add a main file and we're going to add main index.js. Perfect. The base is there. The base for our package.json is there. The next thing we need to do is we need to add a couple of scripts. So essentially what we're going to do now is we're going to add a few scripts here. And let me explain to you what I did here. Essentially, I've said, okay, I have two types of scripts that I want to run within this container, within the Docker container. So if I run this in the terminal within the Docker container, I want you to make sure to do whatever I'm telling you here to do. So the first one is dev. And essentially what we're doing here is we're going Tailwind CSS. And what we're doing is we're converting our input CSS with our output CSS. So let me navigate to the actual website of Tailwind CSS and just show you what I do here. I'm going to scroll down and this is what I'm doing here. So I'm taking this Tailwind CSS input to output. So this is how you start Tailwind as we are developing, but I'm actually going to add it to my package.json so that my Docker container knows what I'm talking about when I run that command inside of my Docker container. All right, so the next one is start. So whenever I hit or run the start command, I want the following to run. So we are going to run browser sync. So browser sync is a great feature where we have a live reload on the fly. So when we do any changes within our Tailwind or within the project, it will automatically update. And this is quite powerful. So again, I'll drop in the description below, I'll drop all this so it's easy to copy and paste. But again, what we're doing here is we're saying browser sync, we want to start a server. Where do we want that server to start? We want to start it in the src folder, which is right here. And I want specifically port 3000 open and I want the reload delay to be 10. Perfect. So with that all done, the next thing I want to do is I want to add the def dependency. So def dependencies, I'm just going to paste it in here. I'll explain to you what it is. Def dependencies is essentially we're telling Docker, hey, we do need Tailwind CSS and we do need browser sync to make sure that this entire container is working properly. So that's what we're doing right there. We are adding that. And then just last but not least, you don't have to add this, but I normally do. Let's just add a little bit of a license and an author there. I don't really add anything in there, but if you are working on a specific project and you want to make sure that you are the author and you have a specific license like a MIT, you can definitely add it in here. All right, with that all set, we're going to hit save and we're going to have a quick review. So we have our DockerIgnore, we have our Dockerfile with all our items within that. The next thing is looking at the actual tailwind.config.js file because ours are pretty bare metal at this stage. So we want to add a few things. So the first thing I want to add, and you can also see it on the Tailwind documentation, and what they basically telling you here is, hey, you have to add this for everything to work. All right. So we are going to copy this guy right here. So I'm going to hit copy and we are going to drop it in our content as well. Again, if you want some more clarification why I do anything in my videos, make sure to drop it in the comments below. I normally respond in a very quick time. And by the way, while you do that, make sure to smash that like and subscribe button while you're at it. That definitely helps, me, it helps you. And I post videos like this on a weekly, daily, monthly basis. So make sure to do that. All right. One thing I want to do, just want to fix that. I see I have 2 C's there. Just want to make sure I have 1 C for content. Okay. So again, we have our base up and running. So we've added Tailwind config. We have a basic setup here in Tailwind config. We have our Package.json. We've added a couple of things in there. We didn't really touch the log file. You don't have to worry about the log file. We have our Dockerfile. And now that we've done all this, we can close everything up. We want to make sure that we save everything. So I'm just going to close everything up so it's nice and fresh. And the next step that I want to do is I want to create my actual index.html folder. So again, we're going to navigate to the console. Again, Windows, you can just right click, but we are going to go CD and we're going to go into the SRC folder. And I want to touch a index.html folder. And when I open up SRC, you're going to see our index.html is right there. So perfect. We can now start adding our actual code. Now, at this point, what I normally like to do, I navigate back to Tailwind CSS documentation, and I'm just going to copy this that we have right here. So I'm just going to copy it. We navigate back to our Visual Studio Code. We're just going to drop it in here. One thing that we do need to change though is the output, because our output is a little different. I've put the output in the CSS folder, so we want to make sure that we add that as well. And there we go. We have our basic setup up and running. Now in the next chapter, I'm actually going to show you how to launch this Docker environment, how to get it all set up, and how to make sure everything runs smoothly. All right, so welcome to chapter 2. Chapter 2, we are looking at physically spinning up our Docker environment, and we are going to take what we did in chapter 1, we're going to actually put it into our actual Docker environment. Now, quick thing, you will notice that I've changed my theme, and the reason for that is because of different lights. I've noticed that every time that I swap between different browsers or different kind of applications, the light on my skin constantly changes. So I've changed this to the light version, and hopefully that's a little bit more consistent and it's not too jarring. All right, so coming back to it, what we did last is we created that Docker file. We created the DockerIgnore right here on the left-hand side, as well as we created our index. Now we're actually going to do the fun part. We are going to create our actual Docker. So let's do it. All right, in the terminal now, Windows, doesn't matter, Mac, doesn't matter. You want to do this in the terminal. Now you want to make sure that you are in the main project directory. You will notice that I'm not, I'm in the SRC. So I'm just going to say cd // right there. All right, now with that done, what we're going to do is we're going to start with Docker. So first thing, I'm going to type in Docker. We're going to say bold, we're going to say T, and then we're going to name it something. So let's call this Tailwind project like that. And always make sure that you finish it off with a little dot at the end, because that is super important. If you don't have that dot, that can definitely give you a lot of trouble. All right, so with that, we are gonna hit enter and we're gonna get the Docker to do its thing. So it's gonna run everything and it's gonna build everything for us. Now, if everything has built successfully, sometimes you can run into issues with it, but it will show you this little description that I have right here. So you'll see that it said run npm install. It did everything, it copied, so everything it followed within that Docker file that we created here. And it is basically saying, hey, what's next? What do you want to do next? But at this stage, I am good. Thank you very much. I actually want to run the Docker to make sure that it's running properly. All right, so with that all done, let's run the Docker. Let's see how it looks like. So I'm going to start with Docker and we're going to say run, and I'm going to open up a port. We're going to say port number 3000. We're going to repeat that, and we are going to say which project we want to run. So I'm going to say Tailwind project, and we're going to hit enter and let's see what happens. There we go. Now in my case, it is showing that Tailwind CSS setup is completed in the Docker itself. So right here, we can see that it's done that, as well as the browser sync, and it gave us a local and external URL that we can follow. So I'm going to click on it. I'm going to hold in command. If you are on a PC, you're going to hit control, you're going to click that, and we're going to see if this is spinning up. Now, I am going to open up localhost as well, because sometimes I do have issues when I go either to 127 or to localhost, and I can see that localhost is running. So I can see hello world is there. Everything is working the way it should be. Now, I never use Safari, so I'm going to take this and I'm going to copy it and I'm going to open it up with my preferred browser, which in this case, it is Edge, and I'm going to drop it in there and we can see that hello world is working. And by the way, did you see on the right-hand side that browser sync is working as well? Everything is working the way that it should. So I'm just going to quickly inspect element because I see that it's not actually showing properly Tailwind CSS. So I can see, okay, yeah, we do have a couple of issues. And if you have these issues, I know exactly what it is, and I'm going to show you how to fix that. All right. So with that, we are going to shut down our server right here. So I am going to, for now, just leave it as is, but eventually we want to shut this down. And what I want to do now is navigate to the Docker extension that we have. So when we navigate to the Docker extension, now I do have a few previous projects that I've worked, you can see right here, but in your case, you're going to see Tailwind project with a little play button. And that means that it's actually running. And then when you hover over it, it shows you a couple of basic things. It's showing that port 3000 is up and running, which is great. Now, when we navigate to our actual Docker dashboard and we go to containers, you're going to see that it is running. So in your case, you're only going to see one. I do have a previous Docker, like I said, that I was working with, kind of preparing for this video, but you'll see that you have a Docker running, which is perfect. That's exactly what we want. Now, next steps, we are going to connect our Visual Studio with that specific Docker. At this point, with this, where you are now, this folder structure, we're done with it. We're not going to mess with this anymore. We're actually going to code within the Docker itself. So I'm going to click on the Docker extension that we have, and I'm going to right click on the Docker that's running right now, and we're going to say attach a Visual Studio code. So you're going to see that it's starting the dev container and it's attaching, which is perfect. That's what we want. So now you're going to see that you have a separate Visual Studio code open apart from the other one. So I'm going to minimize the other one because we're not going to use that right now. And now we are going to work with the one that's connected. So how do you know if your Visual Studio code is actually connected to your Docker container? Now you're going to know because on the left bottom, it's going to say container. It's going to have a little green, and essentially it's telling you that it's connected. However, when you click on the folder structure, there's nothing going on. So first things first, we want to click on open folder. And now we actually need to navigate where we want this folder to be connected to. So we're going to click on the three dots and we are going to look for user or USR. Then we're going to navigate down. We're going to look at everything. And the one that I specifically want is the SRC and the app. So this is where our little project resides. So I'm going to hit OK, and you're going to see that we are going to successfully connect to our entire project. So there we go. We have our Docker up and running. It's completely containerized. It's completely separate to that of our local environment, which means that we can start coding. Now, one cool thing I want to show you, here we have our hello world up and running. Now, you notice that in the previous window, or when we loaded the local host, we had those errors. It basically showed that, hey, there is no output CSS. And the reason for that is because we still need to run our actual Tailwind command to compile everything from input CSS to output CSS. So what we're going to do is we're going to navigate back to our project, and we are going to open up a new terminal. And again, this is for when you're on a Linux box or a Mac, but if you are in the PC base, you can just right click and go create new file. So I'm going to go to cd src, and I'm going to go to cd css. And now that we are in the CSS, I am going to touch a new CSS folder because we don't have anything in there right now. And the one that we want to create, if I navigate back to my browser, the one that they specifically want is input.css. So when we navigate up here in the documentation, it will showcase right here. When we do run that other command, you're going to notice that it's looking for an input.css file. So navigating back to our Visual Studio Code, we are going to touch a input.css file, and that is going to create that input that we need. Now, the next step is we actually need to add a few things within our input.css file. And again, I'm just going to copy it, but we want the Tailwind base, components, and utilities. And this is all part of the core to make sure everything is running smoothly. Again, make sure you type this out, because it is going to help you a lot to get used to everything. So I've just copied it. I want you to type it out if you can. And I'm going to drop it in this CSS file, and I'm going to hit save. All right, so now that we have our input CSS created, we've touched it, and we've also added the base components and utilities. The next step is we want to run the code, or we want to run the command so that it actually goes and creates that output folder. Because again, if we navigate back to the browser, we're going to see that this is not really working, because if we inspect element, it is not actually recognizing any type of output.css file. So again, I'm going to open up my terminal. Don't know what happened to it. And you're going to see I'm in the core of the Docker itself, but within USR SRC app. And we are going to hit npm run dev. And essentially what it's doing now, it did go and created that output.css file right here. So everything that we are using is within this output CSS file, and it is ready to go. So if we make any changes to anything, it is going to pick it up and it is going to apply it to our actual server. So now if I refresh this, boom, you're going to see that it's working. So let's quickly have a look at what specifically we have here. What we have here is when we go back to our index.html, you're going to see that we have text 3x and we have font bold and we have underline. And that's essentially what we are seeing within our actual browser. So at this point, we successfully went and created a Docker. Within the Docker, we have the container, and within the container, we have our Tailwind up and running. So just to show you how this works, and if I navigate between this two, if I go and add anything here, so let's change it to hello world everyone, and let's hit save, go back to the browser, and you're gonna see, boom, it already goes and creates. We don't even need to refresh the browser, which is super powerful. All right, so this was the part where we got everything up and running for the Docker environment. The next chapter in this video, I want to play around with Tailwind a little bit. What we're going to do is when we go to the resources on the left-hand side, this is going to show us the basics of Learn UI Design, as well as, they also have some training stuff that you can use. But really what I want to do is I want to go to templates, and we want to make sure that we have the Tailwind UI, and we are going to play around with some of these templates. Now, the one that I really want to play around with, just to show you the power of Tailwind CSS, is the Euro section. So we're going to take this, we're literally going to copy the code. We're not going to write everything out just because I don't want the video to be like 3 hours. But again, I want you to, on your own time, perhaps type this out. But in the next chapter, we are going to copy this. I'm going to go through some basics of this. We are going to create a light version, and we are going to create a dark version. We're going to make a few adjustments, and I'm going to show you how powerful this is, how powerful Tailwind CSS is. So make sure to check out the next chapter. All right, right, so this part of the video, we are going to take this slider and we will be adding it to our actual Visual Studio Code project, which is containerized in the Docker, which is working fantastically well. So if I go to my local host, we can see that the last few changes we made, it's working great. It's working fantastic. Now, if you have any problems with your project or you have any issues spinning up your Docker container or anything like that, drop it in the comments below because I can definitely give you a helping hand if you are struggling. Other than that, also check out the documentation when it comes to the Tailwind CSS. They do have some great documentation that can also really help. All right, so let's jump into it. First things first, I am navigating to the Euro section. So again, I am in the Tailwind UI part of everything. And I'm gonna take this code, we're gonna copy it exactly like it is, navigate back to our hello world. We're gonna get rid of this hello world and we're gonna drop in all that code. Now here, you're gonna see how powerful the whole Tailwind CSS is. So when I hit save and we navigate back to the actual browser and we go to our local host, I don't even have to press refresh. Like, it automatically dropped everything in exactly how I want it to be. That is pretty powerful. Like, I can't get over how powerful this is. And it's super quick. It's super quick to get everything kind of up and running. By the way, I'm just gonna close all these extra tabs that I have because we really don't need it anymore. All right, so now let's play around with it. I want to activate dark mode. So let's just go back to the Tailwind resources or the documentation for that matter, and let's go and actually activate dark mode. Let's tell it that we want dark mode as well. So scrolling down on the left-hand side, you're gonna see dark mode and you are going to see a basic explanation of it. By the way, I am in the process of creating another video where we will develop slowly, step by step, we'll develop an entire website from start to finish using Tailwind, similar to the Bootstrap video that I created. The link is in the description below, and I've also tiled it into the actual video. While you do that, make sure to smash that like and subscribe button, and I will show you exactly how to create a website from start to finish using Tailwind CSS. All right, again, let's go back to it. So one thing I do want to do is I want to add dark mode selector in our actual modules export, and this is within our Tailwind config.js file. So navigating back to Visual Studio Code, I am going to close the index for now. I'm going to close the input and we're going to open up the Tailwind config and we are going to add it in here. So now one thing is I do want to do this correctly. So we have module exports and right below that we can add the dark mode. So we have it right here and we can just drop it in, make sure we have a comma, which we do. And now we've actually told Tailwind CSS, hey, listen, we are going to have two types here. We are going to have the light version and the dark version. Now, with that said, please keep in mind that we're still going to manually change it. We are not going to create any type of JS that's going to automatically do this based on the system, but we will do that in the next video that I am creating. Make sure to drop in the comments below if you want me to kind of speed up and get the video out there. I'll truly appreciate that. All right, so now with that said, we have the dark mode selector in there and nothing is really going to happen. So if you even go back to our actual local host, you're going to see nothing is going to be different. But when we go to Visual Studio Code and we open up our index.html, and within the HTML, and we're going to open up a class, we are just going to add dark as it is right there. But at this stage, when we navigate back, we hit refresh, nothing is going to happen. There is still one or two things that we do need to do. And one thing I do want to add is the dark BG black, just so we can test and make sure that this is actually working. Let's go back to Visual Studio Code. And right here, I am going to add this class. Let me quickly explain what we're doing here. We're saying that when it's dark mode, which is this a little dark and then colon, we want to do BG black. So let's hit save and let's see if anything changes as it is right now. And there you can see it has changed to the actual dark or the black background. Now, when we want to test this and we want to make sure everything is kind of working the way it's supposed to, we want to change this, or we can just take this out. So when we take this out, or we change it to light for that matter, and that's kind of what I wanted to say, you'll see that it automatically goes back to the light. So perfect. We are going to undo that. I want it to run on the dark, but one little extra thing I also want to add is I want to take this exact thing and I want to copy it and add it to the body tag. right there. Perfect. And now we can technically get rid of this. We don't really need this anymore. And the reason I want everything to be either BG white or dark black is because I want the whole body of the entire website to be affected and not just this section that we are working with. So again, you're not going to see any kind of difference, but now I want to go and start playing around with a different kind of background, different kind of black, because this black is a little too much. So we're navigating back to the Tailwind CSS and we are going to search or look for colors. I normally just kind of search on the left-hand side, and when I see colors, great. And the one I really like is the Slate 700 or the Slate 800. So let's go back to our code, and we are going to say BG Slate, and let's try 800 and see how that looks like. Okay. Now that's a little too light for me. Now I'm going to make this just a tiny bit smaller so we can quickly navigate between the two. Let's change it to, let's see how 900 looks like. 900 looks pretty good for me. 900 looks great. So there we can see that I quickly changed the background color by literally just adding or modifying a class. Like that is insane how amazingly quick everything is. Now, let's just play around. I just want to show you how powerful this is. Let's say we don't want dark. Let's say we want red 600. Let's see how that looks like. Obviously, it's not going to look great. And we're only doing this just because I want to show you how everything kind of works. But when we hit the 600, it is going to have a shocking red color, which by the way, isn't that bad, but it isn't great for that matter. All right, so let's go and change that back to Slate. And now we are going to start playing around with making this dark version look pretty good. All right, so now we have our dark version here. The first thing I want to do is modify these items. So I want to change the text so that we can actually see it. So navigating back to code, let's go to the actual part where we have the menu items. Now you can hold in Alt and we can go and select multiple areas. It's a quick little hack, quick little feature to make it easier. And we're going to say dark, and we're going to say text gray, and we are going to go for 200. Let's see how 200 looks like. Let's go back to the browser. Yeah, that looks pretty good. I like that. Let's also do the same for the login as well. So I am just going to literally copy this and we are going to paste it. Now, one thing you're going to notice is that we have text small, we have font semi-bold, leading 6, we have text gray, 900, but then for dark, we have text gray 200. Now, why are we doing that? Why are we not just changing it right there? Well, the beauty is if we take out dark again, we haven't physically changed anything when it comes to the main thing. Like, I still can't get over how powerful this is. All right, coming back to code, I'm going to switch back to dark. We're going to hit save. Now, the next thing I want to change is this part right here. We want to do the same for it. So to speed up some time here, I am going to copy the text gray here, and we are going to add it as well. So I'm going to navigate or scroll down, and we're just going to go past the actual mobile navigation as well. I'm just going to minimize or make this part a little smaller just so it's easier to kind of read everything. And the first thing I want to do is change this H1. So I want to change that H1, and I want to change the actual paragraph as well, but I don't want the paragraph to be that light. I want it to be about 500. So let's see how that looks like. Already 10 times better. Like, we have the white right here and we have our actual paragraph as well. Like, this is pretty good. Now, one thing I want to do is, I feel like this is too thick for the dark version. So let's go and change it. Let's change the actual thickness of everything. So I am going to add dark again. So every time when you add or modify the dark, you want to add an extra dark tag within your class or CSS part, the class section for that matter. And you can see that we have font bold here. So I'm just going to go with font. Let's go for font semi-bold. Just a slight little change there because I feel like it's too thick, and that really looks good to me. So now when we switch between the two, it's still going to look pretty good. All right, the next thing is I want to change that actual border for this one as well, just so it kind of blends in with the dark as well. So let's go and look for it. So it's right here. We can see that we have a couple of things here. We have relative, we have rounded full, px3, py1, text sm, leading 6, all that good stuff. Now let's go and add add the dark here. So I am going to say dark, and we're going to say text gray, and let's go for 200 for now. And the same I want to do for the actual ring gray as well. So we're going to say dark, and we're going to say ring gray 400, and let's make it a 10. Perfect. Now that we navigate back, we are going to see the text has changed. The text has changed beautifully. One thing I do want to change as well is the actual main color, but I still have the learn more here at the bottom that I want to change. So let's navigate to the learn more, and let's quickly change that one as well. So we have the learn more here. So I'm going to say dark, and we're going to say text gray 200. And let's quickly navigate back. We have our learn more. That looks perfect. Now, let's go and change this color. Let's change this bluish kind of almost purple color. And let's go for something different. Let's go for maybe pink. Why don't we go for pink? Like, I feel like pink is never used. So why don't we just do that? All right, so let's go for pink 500. Let's see how pink 500 looks like. All right. Now, the thing is, when I change the main color, I don't want to change it just for the dark. I want to change it for everything. So we want to first determine where those colors are being called. So first off, the button itself. So let's go and look for that get started. So I'm going to speed things up by just going and searching for get started. So let's say get started right here. Perfect. So let's go for a different type of color. So that is the actual button itself. I want to make sure it looks like it is. It says get started. So that is pretty good. And let's look for BG. So we do have BG indigo right here. So let's go and change this to dark BG pink 500. Just to test, I know that we have to change it everywhere, but that looks pretty good. Okay, I'm gonna go with that. So let's get rid of this dark and let's get rid of this indigo, and we have it just as is. Hit save. That looks pretty good. That's a nice little smooth color, but you're going to notice when we hover over it, it's still showing the blue. So we do want to change that. So let's go and search for that. Where are we? It is a lot's going on here. So let's see where that learn more is. It's right here on line item 84. I'm just going to put a little spot there. I know that it's debug. It's not really meant for what we're doing, but it helps me just to kind of see where we're at. But I'm looking for hover. So when I see hover here, I want to change that one as well. And let's change this one to maybe 700 because I actually want to see a hover effect when I hover over it. That looks good. Now we have our hover effect. That looks pretty decent. So let's go and change that read more as well. So we have the read more here at the top, and we're just going to change it right there. We're going to say pink 500 and hit save. There we go. We have it right here. And let's see if we can change the logo. I'm not 100% sure if we can, but hey, why don't we just try? I think that the logo is coming in, the default logo is coming in as an SVG, which it is right here. And hey, look, it looks like we can actually do it. So let's do it. Let's change it to pink and hit save. It is doing 600, so we'll see how that looks like. That looks good for testing purposes. Obviously, if I was actually designing and developing the website, I would spend so much more time in making sure that this is perfect. So I'm going to take away the dark and we're going to say light, and let's see how that looks like. That looks pretty decent. That looks pretty good. See how quickly it was to change a couple of things here. We literally went from light to dark. So if I change this to dark, it is rapidly quick at how quickly you can spin up a website using Tailwind. And you know, I'm actually at a point where I'm going, is this better than Bootstrap? Is this at a point where it's more powerful than Bootstrap? Drop in your comments below. I would love to know what you guys are thinking about it, because I'm at the point now where I'm going, maybe it is. Maybe it is a little bit more powerful. Thanks for watching the video. I truly appreciate it. And with that all said, thanks for watching.